Hello, I'm Ron Strickland. This webcast is one of a series in which I'm providing some brief lectures and commentaries on topics from the courses I teach in literature and cultural studies. In another webcast, I've provided some introductory background to the Anglo-Saxon epic poem Beowulf. In this installment, I'll say some things about the aesthetic form and prosody of Beowulf. I'll begin with a typical example of how prosody functions in modern English poetry before turning to the distinctive Anglo-Saxon prosody of Beowulf. Prosody is the arrangement of sounds and pattern of repetition of sounds that gives poetry its emphatic, distinctive effect and sets it apart from prose, whether written or spoken. One of the most important aspects of prosody is the poem's rhythm or meter. The most common meter in modern English poetry is Iambic Pentameter, in which an unstressed syllable is followed by a stressed syllable with 5 beats to each line. Here's a familiar line from the musical comedy My Fair Lady. The rain in Spain falls mainly in the plain. And here's what it looks like when we mark the stressed syllables. And here's what it looks like when we mark the unstressed syllables. But poets will often stray from this regular pattern of rhythm. For example, consider these 2 lines from John Milton's poem Lycidas. I've marked the stresses. At last he rose and twitched his mantle blue. Tomorrow to fresh woods and pastures new. And here's what it looks like with the unstressed syllables marked. As you may have noticed, I didn't read the stressed syllables correctly according to the strict pattern of Iambic Pentameter. In the second line, I simply could not put the stress on to where it should be according to the strict Iambic Pentameter, but instead I stressed fresh. So, tomorrow to fresh woods and pastures new. In fact, poets will often vary from the strict pattern of Iambic Pentameter. In Beowulf, there are 4 stressed syllables in each line, in contrast to the 5 stress pattern of Iambic Pentameter. And in Anglo-Saxon poetry, like Beowulf, it doesn't matter how many unstressed syllables there are. The stressed syllables in Beowulf gain added strength by a feature called alliteration. So the rhythmic pattern of Beowulf depends upon alliteration, that is, repeated sounds of vowels and consonants on stressed syllables, rather than a pattern of fixed meter. And typically there are 4 stresses in each line, although this may vary from time to time. Beowulf also uses a feature called medial caesura, in which there's a split in the middle of each line and an attempt to balance the 2 parts of the line. Here's an example of the first 2 lines from a modern English translation. So, the Spear Danes in days of old were led by a lord famed for his forays. Notice that there are 5 stresses in the first line, so that 4 stress rule is broken immediately. But notice also the alliteration, the consonant sounds of S as so, spear, and D, Danes, days, and old, the L sound, led and lord, and the F sound, famed for his forays. There's also a lot of alliteration in the repeated vowel sounds, as in so and old, Danes, days, famed, and forays, and in lord, for, and forays. Now I'll read a few lines in our modern translation from the prologue, the beginning of the poem, in order to give a sense of how the alliteration supports the rhythm. So, the Spear Danes in days of old were led by a lord famed for his forays. We heard of that prince's power and prowess, often shield-chefing ambushed enemies, took their mead benches, mastered their troops, though first he was found forlorn and alone. His early sorrows were swiftly consoled. He grew under heaven, grew to a greatness renowned among men of neighboring lands. His rule recognized over the whale road, Danegeld granted him. That was a good king. Now, here are those same lines read in the original Anglo-Saxon by Professor Peter S. Baker of the University of Virginia. If you listen to them more than once, I think you'll begin to pick out some of the words.
Hwatwe gardena in jardagum, feud kuninga frimje prunon, hutha edelinga sellen fremedon. Oft sjud shaving sjaldena fratum, monigum meitum meldo settla of tach, eizo de erlas, sittan äreft werk verschaft funden. Heithas provrie bad, weeks under wognum werth mindum thach, of that him eigfilch thara sittendra, over hron rade hyran sjode, gomban judan, that was good kuning.
Ah, yes, that was good kuning. Kuning means king in Anglo-Saxon, but there's another term called kenning that I want to say something about. Kennings are a typical feature of Anglo-Saxon poetry in which two words are combined to make a short metaphorical phrase that serves as a descriptive alternate name for someone or something. These can be celebratory, as in Speardanes, meaning the Danish warriors, or ornamental, as in Whale Road, meaning the sea, and sometimes kind of entertainingly sardonic, as in Bone House, for the human body. You will find these and many more examples of kennings in Beowulf. With that, I'll conclude this webcast. But, as always, if you have questions or comments, please don't hesitate to send me an email.